Welcome to the assignment number 3 unpacking video. So in this video, I'm going to unpack assignment number 3 for EDFD460 and give you some direction, some hints about how to start thinking about it. Remembering that this video is not about telling you what to do. You still need to be thinking about that and coming up with your own approaches, but it unpacks some of those elements that are going to be really important in the assignment. So the first thing is really, what is Assessment 3? So Assessment 3 is the development of an imagination and creativity framework for implementation in school or early childhood contexts. So this means you're developing a framework, so you're developing a structure, you're developing a document, you're developing some guidelines that enable a culture of imagination and creativity to either be implemented or enhanced. You know, if the school's already got one, it's going to be enhanced. If they don't have one, it's going to be implemented within a school or early childhood context. So you're taking the knowledge that you have gained throughout the unit and you are applying this knowledge. And I talk about that a little bit later on as to why that's important. There are 3 criteria in this assignment. So the first one is to develop a framework itself. So that means that we will need to work on our understanding about what frameworks are, how they can be put together, how they appear, what they look like, what the purpose of a framework is, and how to develop a framework that is meaningful and intuitive. The purpose of the framework itself, so the why of the framework, is to develop a culture of imagination in an educational setting and to develop a culture of creativity in an educational setting. So the framework is this sort of all-encompassing, overarching object, and the purpose of it is to develop this culture of imagination and creativity. So the purpose of the framework is to encourage and inform this culture of imagination and creativity. So it's not a one-stop shop. It's not the final word in what it would be to have a culture of imagination and creativity, but it is about an entry point. It's about opening up the doors to teachers and students in a school as to how imagination and creativity can be applied to that context. You're developing a framework that applies the knowledge put forward in assignment number 2. And really you want to be thinking about your framework and the presentation that you do for assignment number 2 as being one package. So this actually all really started off right at the beginning of the semester with the introductory business card. So you're asked to do a professional business card, and you may want to consider using your professional business card or a refined version of your professional business card as part of this whole package at the end. Okay, so some of the more administrative aspects of it. So the submission format is your choice. Okay, so what you want to be doing is having a look at the rubric and reading through criterion number 1 and trying to unpack what that means. So what is criterion 1 asking of you? And you know, it's asking it to be user-friendly. It's asking it to be intuitive. There's a mention of technology. There's a mention of attendance to the visual components of your framework. So you want to be thinking, what medium can I use that will enable me to create a really great framework? And as we go into the second half of the semester, as I said, we will be looking at frameworks and giving you some ideas about how you might do it. And I'll be showing you some examples of this assignment from last year. Please note that the assignment task has changed, but the premise, certainly the design of some of the frameworks will help you. I should note at this stage that this does mean that Word documents are not going to be accepted. Okay, so this is about upskilling yourself and becoming an adept user of technologies and contemporary media to create this kind of project, and Word really just doesn't cut it in this assignment. So if you were thinking immediately of doing a Word document, scrub that from your mind. The size is 1,600 words or equivalent, which is not a lot. So there's a lot to get into that 1,600 words. But it probably means that you want to move on from thinking about great big screeds of text, bullet points and snappy little statements, are going to be more applicable in this case. And you submit it via Leo. Okay, so some considerations for this assignment. The key word is application, okay? So when you look through the rubric, you'll see that it's about applying your knowledge in order to create this framework. And so that means that you're not regurgitating information, you're not repeating facts at your reader. What you've done is you've taken those facts, that knowledge, which you have put together for assignment number 2, and you are applying it so that a culture of imagination and creativity can be encouraged in a school setting. So that means that you need to synthesize that information and actually put it into a format where somebody else can apply it to what they do. So you're not asking them to read information and then think about how they're going to apply it. You're actually doing that for them. You're taking the information and you're putting it into a format so that the reader can apply that knowledge and strategies and processes in the development of this culture of imagination and creativity. So it certainly does require more than repetition of facts. You might want to think about assignment number 3 as being the how of this whole project, and assignment number 2 as the why. Okay, so assignment number 2 is the promotion of imagination and creativity. Assignment number 3 is the application of imagination and creativity. Another key term in this assignment is the word framework. And so you want to start thinking about what a framework might be. A framework that we all use is curriculum documentation. Okay, so it sets out what students need to know, how we might deliver that content, how we might assess them, and links with cross-curricular and capabilities and things like that. So that is an example of a framework. So in the context of assignment number 3, the framework is a tool that can be used to start or enhance a culture of imagination and creativity. So if you think about it, that you create your framework and you give it to somebody and they are able to read it, whichever way they want to do that, and it helps them to scaffold and structure and frame what that culture of imagination and creativity is going to look like and how it's going to be enacted. You might also want to think of a framework as being a roadmap to imagination and creativity. Think about your mind maps. When you look at your mind maps, especially from a bird's eye view, if you start at the beginning and you move through the different weeks, it's actually a roadmap of your thinking. And you can apply that same structure, that same premise to the development of your framework. This means that the design of your framework and the choice of medium is going to be important. Okay, so how do you want your audience to engage with your framework? How do you want them to access the information and the strategies and the knowledge that is in there? Okay, this is why I'm saying that it's a Word document's not going to work, because it's fairly standard and it's great for writing an essay, but not much else. You are being challenged to think about how the design of the framework and the choice of medium is going to really enhance what you're doing. And assignment number 2 with the choice of your technology is a little bit of a practice for that. So the framework is obviously is the first criterion. So the framework itself, the design and the structure and intuitiveness and user friendliness is all part of that first criterion. Then you move into criteria 2 and 3, which is the development of an imagination culture and a creativity culture. And they can either be very separate or you can interweave them. It's up to you. You go back and have a look at the thinking and the forum posts over the course of the semester to see how you might deal with that. But it's certainly up to you. But in terms of imagination and creativity, there are 6 points that you want to be focusing on. So a contextual definition of imagination and creativity, identifying the concepts to address and challenges to overcome, consideration of implications for a range of school community members, evidencing and mapping the transformation of data, aligning the framework with pertinent components of the curriculum, and interweaving and evidencing of personal and pedagogical theoretical perspectives. I should just note in point 3 there, with the range of school community members, you're looking at teachers and students, okay? And I'll explain that a little bit more later on. Okay, so the first one was a contextual definition of imagination and creativity. I'd recommend that you refer to your Forum 2A and 3 posts and refine them if needs be. Okay, so look at the feedback that I gave you, certainly for Forum 2A, both in terms of the content and the APA. Ensure that you are still maintaining an adherence to the literature as well as your own understanding. So these definitions, which are the ones the school will adopt in their culture of imagination and creativity, they cannot just be, I think imagination is, okay? It needs to be, as you did in your Forum 2A and 3 posts, something that is a combination of synthesis of literature and then a crafting of your own take on it. So a nice blend of the two. You can also quote or paraphrase the work of your peers, making sure that you reference them correctly if you are using their work from the forum posts. The second aspect to be dealing with in criteria 2 and 3 is to identify concepts to address and challenges to overcome, both tangible and intangible, by providing appropriate strategies and solutions. And this means, what are some of the key points of discussion that have come up over the course of the semester in terms of imagination and creativity that need to be identified and addressed and acknowledged in a framework. Remembering that you've only got 1,600 words, so you don't need to list every single one. You might just want to deal with a couple of the pertinent ones. So what you're really doing here is going back and having a look at the posts and your mind map entries to identify important learning moments, those light bulb moments. An example may be, a lot of you realize the importance of collaborative endeavor in an imaginative and creative culture. So you hadn't necessarily thought about that before, but the literature and your own engagement in the unit has identified and highlighted that collaborative endeavor really helps in terms of imagination and creativity. So that is a concept that you would want to address. And in one way it is intangible because it's a bit nebulous, it's out there, but you can make it tangible by suggesting or putting forward ideas for the way that collaborative endeavor can be enacted in a school. You want to consider how in your framework, you identify, signpost, address, and overcome concepts and challenges. Okay, so you need to first of all be able to identify them. You need to be able to signpost within your framework where they are, so it's clear which ones you have decided that you're going to put forward as being important in a culture of imagination and creativity. What are the concepts? What are the challenges? One of the challenges may be the fact that you need to transform teacher perception. A lot of teachers still think that creativity and imagination is about, sitting in the art room, and as we now know that it's not. Another challenge may be the physical environment. So do you think that the physical environment is important for a culture of imagination and creativity? And if so, what strategies do you put forward within your framework to help the reader make changes environmentally? And of course, there will be other things as well. And these concepts and challenges we do discuss in the second half of the semester, but I'm not going to drip feed you the answers to them, okay? You need to be thinking about, what are some of the concepts and challenges that I've identified over the first few weeks of the semester that are important and perhaps made you sit up and think, and how can you put that into your framework and assist other people to sit up and think? Consider implications for teachers and students. So this is the school community. In order to keep it nice and tight in the assignment, and so that the assignment's not too broad, your only concerns within assignment number 3 are going to be teachers and students. So we're not interested in principals or departments of education we're interested in principals, but we're not interested in departments of education or school councils or anything like that. Your focus for assignment number 3 is going to be developing a framework that is for teachers and students. So your framework is for both teachers and students, and you need to work out a way of facilitating both. Okay, so it's not just one or the other; it's both of them. Remember that teacher imaginative and creative understanding is as important as student understanding. So you probably want to have a nice balance between the two as you develop this. And there are ways that you can do it. So you can either have tabulated data, so you can have this is how this particular concept would work for a teacher, or this and how it would work for a student. You might have a series of icons, an icon that represents teacher content within your framework and student content with your framework. Or you might even have a color coding system. And this is part of the signposting, the visual, the user friendliness, the navigability, that kind of thing. And you're not left alone on this. We do talk about it throughout weeks 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. But I want you to start thinking about this now. How do I visually represent and enhance the content that I'm putting into my framework in terms of the students and the teachers? Number 4 is evidencing and mapping of transformation. And this is really about data. And you will, of course, immediately be thinking about the MICT, the MICS, and the MICSCH, which are the tasks associated with weeks 4, 5, and 6. And in these tasks, what you're doing is you are developing ways of mapping and evidencing imaginative and creative behavior in students, teachers, and schools, respectively. And when you're mapping transformation, when you're mapping imaginative and creative endeavor, you're really collecting data. Okay, you are gathering data, you are gathering evidence of what is happening. You are asking questions that allow people to respond to you, and you're also gathering data by observing or taking photographs or whatever it may be. And this is an important part of the framework because accountability and data gathering are pretty much endemic in contemporary school life. So whether or not you agree with the gathering of data, you need to be able to do it, and you need to be able to interpret that data in order for projects such as this one to be viable. So you want to be able to track and map the transformation of a school's culture, as well as track and map the transformation of teachers and students in their imaginative and creative understanding and endeavors. So it's kind of like a really simple way of thinking about this is that it's a series of surveys, but it needs to be a lot more than that. It needs to be really embedded into the literature. You need to be asking the right questions. Asking a question such as, do you think you're imaginative, is just not good enough. There are far more elements to that question that you will now understand and you can ask. So within your framework, the evidence and mapping of transformation are protocols or proformas or strategies or ways that the teachers and students can identify their imaginative and creative behavior and also then gather data around it and over an iterative process. So they don't just do it once, they may do it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times to see how they are becoming more imaginative and more creative. We return to the MICT, MICS, and MICSCH over the course of the second half of the semester, and we do some peer review of that work, and we sort of really begin to craft and enhance them because they're a really important part of assignment number 3. The 5th aspect of the culture of imagination and creativity is aligning your framework with pertinent components of the curriculum. Now, this does not mean you're writing lesson plans. I'm not interested in lesson plans whatsoever. But what you are doing is signposting within your framework how it relates, how it aligns to the curriculum, particularly in terms of critical and creative thinking and personal and social capabilities. But you might also want to think about providing snapshots of other subjects in imaginative and creative mode. So if you're talking about the process of creativity, or you're talking about the 4C model or the 2C model, or you're referring to some particular part of literature, you might be able to say, this is really applicable in a mathematics classroom if you were doing this, or this is applicable in a literacy classroom if you were doing this, or this would be applicable in an RE class if you were doing this. So you can provide really short, snappy little snapshots of how imaginative and creative endeavor can be identified and seen in other subject areas. So what you're doing is you're providing entry points into the curriculum. You're making those connections for your reader between the concepts of imagination and creativity and how they link to other curriculum areas. I think it's in either week 7 or week 8, we examine curriculum in terms of its imaginative and creative underpinnings. So you are given the opportunity to practice and delve a bit deeper into that. And the 6th component is the interweaving and evidencing of theoretical, pedagogical, and personal perspectives. So that's really the theoretical are the models that we've been looking at, pedagogical are some of those strategies, and the personal are not including, but not completely confined to, your mind maps. Remembering that assignment number 3 is an academic response, so it does need to be underpinned by the literature with a fantastic attendance to APA. That is why in forums 2A and 3A you are asked to reference using APA as a practice for assignment number 2 and assignment number 3. You want to be including your understanding of theory and models, such as 4C, Big C, Little c, Bloom's taxonomy, Meserot's transformation learning theory. Let me just note on that transformation learning theory is really applicable to adults. It's not a theory that really is grounded in young learners. I think young learners can transform their thinking, but because transformative learning theory is predicated on the changing of frames of reference, so the changing of prior knowledge, it's really focused on an adult perspective. So when you're talking about Meserot and transformational theory, you want to be focusing on the teacher component in your framework rather than the student component. You want to be including strategies such as teaching creatively, teaching for creativity. Not solely confined to those again, but that kind of idea. And then your personal approaches to imaginative and creative endeavor, which is going to include sections from your mind maps. And you interweave those throughout your whole framework as evidence of how learning can change, how the reader can be transformed, and how in terms of a personal understanding of imagination and creativity, and also a pedagogical understanding. So they can actually, through practice, learn how to be more imaginative and creative, or acknowledge how they can display their imaginative and creativity in a more tangible and visible way. So those are the 6 points in terms of criteria that are necessary for criterion 2 and criterion 3. So make sure you have a look at the rubric to make more of an understanding of that. Some things that I really want you to think about in this assignment is the navigation throughout your framework, the signposting, and the visual fluency. So you really do want to start thinking about, what is my format going to be? Is it going to be a PDF document? Is it going to be an iBook? Is it going to be a website? So think about how you can put it together in a really user-friendly and sort of slick way. I personally think that iBooks are fantastic. So if you're a Mac user, you can use iBooks Author to create it. And then we actually publish it to iTunes, which is quite exciting. So your work is out there in the open if you want it to be. Also think about how you're going to include your reference list. As this is probably going to be a text-based assignment, you do need to use in-text citations with a reference list at the end. Use assignment number 3 for discussion forum, which is in the assessment module, to ask questions about it. Extensive support is given by myself and Kari, so we want you to rise to the challenge, okay? You are learning how to do something new. So don't just fall back on something you've done before. So don't just fall back on PowerPoint presentations because you've done them before. We're wanting you to learn something new. We will be setting up in a couple of the virtual workshop tasks peer feedback on framework drafts. So there will be an opportunity for you to submit a draft or some ideas of what you're doing, and then to get feedback from your peers. And it will be done in a way that you do actually need to submit a draft in order to get feedback. So it won't be an opportunity just to read what people are doing to get your own ideas. It will be on an equitable basis. And finally, remember to ask questions. There are some questions beginning to come through for assignment number 2 now, which are great. And it's a good way of clarifying ideas and really pushing your thinking. So I hope you found that helpful. And it certainly isn't the entire assignment. So there's lots of thinking you need to do around yourself, about it yourself. But please continue to ask those questions and to think about this and to be challenged and enjoy the process of creating something that is really applicable in terms of a school.